It's July 9th, 2016. Eddie Hall is trying to break history and he has a trick up his sleeve. 500 kilograms or 1,102 pounds was just loaded. People said that lifting this weight was humanly impossible, and there was a good reason for it. From 1996 to 2014, the deadlift record only increased by 36 kilograms. On this day, Eddie was looking to increase the deadlift record by 37 kilograms in just 1 year. Lifting 500 kilograms would be a quantum leap in human capabilities. It would be like Usain Bolt breaking records by seconds in a sport of milliseconds. But lifting 500 kilograms would not just merely be a physical struggle. It would be a psychological battle that nobody would ever want to embark on. Beneath the glitz and glamour of Eddie's deadlift attempt was a dark secret that only someone with an ego bigger than Earth would try. The battle would result in a near-death experience that would soon be studied in history books. And it all started on July 12, 2015 in Trent, England. A fully packed stadium of over 18,000 people is chanting Eddie's name. The reason? Eddie was attempting a new world record of 463 kilos or 1,020 pounds. This was nowhere near 500 kilos, but at the time, it was a weight nobody could even imagine. The rep was so fast that it made Eddie feel like he was on top of the world, but he wanted more. When Eddie was a teen, he promised his dying grandmother that he would win the world's strongest man for her. At the time, he hadn't done so yet and was a failure. His grandmother was more of a mom than his actual mom was. So Eddie was willing to do anything for her. He had already become the deadlift world record holder, but this wasn't enough. Eddie was far from winning the world's strongest man, and his expenses were eating away at him. He was spending 250 pounds a week on food, 250 pounds a week on physiotherapy, another 250 pounds a week on recovery methods, and other miscellaneous expenses adding to 50 pounds a week. Everything added to nearly 4,000 pounds a month. And that was just for himself. On top of all that, he needed to pay for his mortgage, his kids, his wife, and other bills. Eddie was spending more money than he was making, and it was digging into his savings. It would only be a matter of time before Eddie ran out of money. But he had an insane idea. What if Eddie could lift something insane like 500 kilos? Shortly after pulling 463 kilos, Eddie asked the organizer a crazy question. Would he be willing to give 1 million quid or 1.2 million US dollars if he pulled 500 kilos?
Do you reckon you'd be able to get $1 million quid off the company if I did 500?
I don't know, just put it out there.
We'll put it out there because I'll fucking do it.
When will you do it, man?
I'll wear their logo next year.
For next year?
Next year deadlift.
$1 million quid in the
$1 million
deadlift.
quid, then it'll go fucking viral. I'll have your logo on my chest. The offer's there.
But willing to haggle. Half a million?
I'll take 950.
For $1 million, you get sex.
The organizer clearly wasn't prepared to answer this absurd question. 500 kilos would be an insane jump, and it was obvious that the organizer was willing to pay for it. So after the competition was over, Eddie entered negotiations with the organizers to lift 500 kilos. If he could lift 500 kilos 1 year later in 2016, they agreed to pay him a large sum of money. Eddie was ecstatic about the opportunity to make tons of money, but his ego was getting ahead of himself. He said he would be lifting 500 kilos everywhere, on the news, on social media, you name it. But he hadn't even lifted the weights yet, let alone anything even close. People began laughing at him for making such a crazy statement, and it didn't take long before the skeptics were proven right. Just 4 months into his training, Eddie tried to pull 485 kilos. But as Eddie did the rep, it became clear that he overestimated his abilities. The weight didn't even get past his knees. Eddie knew he was in trouble. He already told everyone that he would pull 500 kilos, but he couldn't even do 485 kilos. Eddie knew that if he didn't figure out how to get stronger fast, he would be an embarrassment. In pure desperation, he found the secret that would eventually almost kill him. Someone suggested Eddie to see a neuropsychologist, so he booked an appointment to see one. When he went to his appointment, the neuropsychologist told him about a secret tactic that had never been tried in elite strength sports. Usually, elite sports people have access to 65 to 70% of their muscle fibers. This is done biologically to prevent injury. If someone were to use 100% of their muscle fibers, they would risk their entire body going unconscious. 3 years prior, in 2012, a 22-year-old girl named Lauren Kornacki was able to activate 100% of her muscle fibers. His dad was working on his BMW with his wrench when his car jack slipped. This led the entire car to fall on top of him. Lauren was extremely close with her dad and would do anything to save him. She lifted the entire car with all of her muscle fibers and saved her unconscious father. If Eddie could somehow replicate this incident, he would have the potential to lift 500 kilos. But activating a fight or flight response would be difficult in a deadlift competition. It couldn't be faked, so Eddie needed to trick his mind. Instead of lifting a weight, he needed to visualize himself lifting a person off of his kids. So he turned to a hypnotherapist who helped him create a dark situation. They ended up finding a situation so dark that Eddie never publicly revealed what it was.
If I had to train my brain to put myself in this scenario. That wasn't the scenario I got in my head, by the way. I'm just giving you an example. The actual scenario is something that I cannot talk about because it's very dark, very deep, very disturbing.
When the day came around to lift 500 kilos, everyone was skeptical of Eddie's abilities. Even the organizers didn't think Eddie could lift it.
Did I believe Eddie could pull 500 kilos that night? No, not at all. No, I didn't think he could do it now.
It'd be easy for me to say I knew he'd do it now, but no, if I'm honest, I was 50-50.
11,500 people in a fully packed stadium went to see Eddie lift 500 kilos. He had 3 attempts to deadlift. He started his first attempt with 420 kilos or 925 pounds. The rep was fast and Eddie knew he could attempt 500 kilos. So for his second attempt, he then loaded on 465 kilograms or 1,025 pounds. This already broke his previous world record by 2 kilos. Once again, the rep moved fast. So for his final attempt, Eddie loaded on the big 500 kilos. He went backstage and stared at the bathroom mirror. He was envisioning a dark situation when all of a sudden, a massive wave of euphoria came around. Eddie felt like he could lift the entire world. Once he approached the weight, Eddie looked at the referee and turned him into a devil. He then closed his eyes to put him in his darkest nightmare. As the rep went on, his nose began bleeding and his eyes turned bright blue. Once Eddie locked the weight out, he woke up from his dark world and was back in reality. Eddie collapsed with blood flowing out of his ears, eyes, and nose. He went unconscious and had no idea where he was. As he laid on the floor, a promoter told him to make the weight look easy. So Eddie quickly told everyone to get off of him and gave a speech, but he clearly wasn't feeling right.
I put into this. All the family time that I sacrificed.
Let's have a round of applause for Eddie's wife. What a special moment for the whole family. What an incredible moment for the strength sport world.
If it wasn't for this woman, it wouldn't happen, honestly. She does everything for me. You know, she is my rock. I love you, babe.
As Eddie kept stuttering, it was clear Eddie was not in great shape. Once he went backstage, paramedics pried Eddie's deadlift suit off of him in a panic. They checked his heart rate and it measured at 204 beats per minute. This was abnormally high. Eddie began convulsing and was going in and out of consciousness. The paramedics checked his blood pressure with an ECG. It came back as an error. They checked again, and again. But every time, the machine showed the result as an error. After 4 errors, the paramedics said that the machine must be broken. But the machine was not broken. Eddie's blood pressure was just unreadable. Eddie was a living experiment showing how dangerous it was to use all of your muscle fibers. He was scared out of his mind. Eddie started going blind in the middle of his eyes due to the pressure in his eyes. The next 3 hours was a nightmare. Eddie genuinely thought he was going to die. After time slowly ticked by, the paramedics checked his blood pressure again with an ECG. The result finally came back normal, but everything still wasn't right. The next day, when Eddie went to drive his car, he literally couldn't drive the car. anymore. His brain simply wasn't working. Eddie had signs of a concussion and was bleeding in his brain. When he went to his son's birthday party, he struggled to remember people's names. Even just talking to his brother, his mom, his dad, and his wife was a struggle. It took days for Eddie to return back to normal, and that just shows the energy that the 500 kilograms took out of him. 4 years later, Hafthor Bjornsson lifted 501 kilograms with relative ease, but some controversy still remains. Hafthor didn't lift 501 kilos in a competition setting. He lifted it in his hometown in his home gym, and he even had the weights weighed out by his dad. For that reason, Eddie's 500 kilo deadlift still remains as a world record in competition.